So thanks for giving me a chance to talk about the ELI, the English Language Institute. It's been a main part of my life. My life is intertwined with it. I was a student at the ELI. I was a teacher. We were called teaching fellows then in those days. I was a graduate student, later a PhD student, and an alumna. And then I returned many years later as the director of the English Language Institute, as a research scientist, and now as an emerita of the ELI and of linguistics and of education. So as I say, my life has been very much intertwined with the ELI and with Michigan. When I was an undergraduate, I majored in psychology. And I did it because I was, and still am, interested in learning. I love to learn about learning. But as a young graduate, graduate, I wasn't quite sure what to do with a psychology degree. And I had a lure to travel. I had an adventurous spirit at the time, and I responded to John Kennedy's call for service by enlisting in the U.S. Peace Corps. This was in the 1960s, so I was a Kennedy kid. And I went to Sabah, Malaysia in 1967, 50 years ago, and began teaching English at a government school there, first in an upper primary school, later in what was called the Bridge program, where they went from Malay or Chinese medium to English medium, and then later at the secondary level. Funnily enough, during my 2-year teaching stint, I used materials from the English Language Institute, published by the U of M Press. Later I found out it was called the Rainbow Series, the red books and the green books and the yellow books. But to be honest, I'm not sure how much of the U of M, ELI connection registered with me. However, when I returned to the United States, I had many questions about what I had been doing, and I was still really intrigued in learning. So I chose to come to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, for its outstanding academics in order to study those areas and also to become a better teacher. And I enrolled in the MA in TESOL program with a specialization in linguistics. You could do linguistics or education. I chose linguistics. So I had courses at the ELI and in the Fries building. I think we're sitting in it now. It's called the North Quad, but it was the Fries building where linguistics was housed in those days. And when I came as a grad student, an MA student, it was a very exciting time. I was pretty newly arrived from overseas. I had great classmates, great teachers. Ron Wardhoff was the director of the ELI then, and he was very instrumental in getting materials development projects going. It was too early for Reader's Choice when I first arrived. That happened later. But Joan Morley was fast at work producing materials. Mary Lawrence was. Some of the other lecturers were. It was an exciting time to be a grad student. Ron Wardhoff hired Doug Brown, who became my major professor and was on my dissertation. He directed my dissertation. And Doug was a great mentor. He was young himself. He brought an excitement in terms of ideas and people to our attention. I remember the day he strode into our class and said, "I just read an interesting article that I think might have a formative influence on the field. It's called Interlanguage by Larry Selinker." Just as a footnote, Larry Selinker was later to become the director of the ELI. At the time, of course, he wasn't, and interlanguage did have a shaping influence on the field that was later to be called second language acquisition. Doug also organized conferences. We had applied linguistics conferences, and I remember the one in 1975 brought such luminaries as S. Pitt Corder here, Evelyn Hatch, and fellow graduate students who have made their own mark, people like John Schumann and Merrill Swain. I met them all here in 1975. At the ELI itself, Doug brought Earl Stevick, Jim Elatus of TESOL fame, Bob Kaplan, who was to become the first president or the founder of the American Association of Applied Linguistics. So again, it was a pretty exciting time. So as a teaching fellow here, one of the great things was having lots of activity and interaction with my fellow graduate students. We were housed in cubicles in the North University building, and so there was a buzz going on all the time, people chatting enthusiastically, sharing lesson plans, talking about what they were interested in. So there was a sort of another, how shall I say, another syllabus going on, another whole learning opportunity. And among those students were Joanne Abasol and Barb Dobson, Sandy Silberstein was there, Barry Taylor, Rita Wong, Kyle Perkins, and then later Mark Clark, who also added luster to the ELI U of M name. In addition to my fellow students, of course, there were lecturers. Joan Morley, Mary Lawrence, Joyce Zook, Betsy Soden, and Joan in particular was a mentor to me. I learned a lot from her. She kind of took me under her wing. I finished my MA, and encouraged by my professors, I decided to stay on for a PhD, which I did in linguistics. And that was very useful, of course, and exciting to me. I had some great professors, Pete Becker, Ken Pike, Ian Catford, of course Doug, and others. Also at the time at the ELI was the testing division. That was going on as well, and under the able leadership of Jack Upshur and Mary Spahn. And later Jack was to help me with my statistics for my dissertation. The ELI also, the North University building, also housed a great library. I mean, it wasn't beautiful, but it had stacks and stacks of books that were relevant to what I was working on, both as an MA student. I wrote a lot of term papers based on those resources, and later for my dissertation. So many years later, I got an invitation to return to Michigan to be a professor and to direct the ELI. And I mean, it was amazing, because I never thought I would come back to the institution that I had learned was the first of its kind in the United States, established in 1941, that had been so important and influential in my own development, and that I knew to still be a thriving institute. So I returned as director, as professor of education and professor of linguistics. And I came with a mission, too. I had wanted to not restore, because it was already here, but give a greater profile to applied linguistics at the University of Michigan, because we were known for that. We were known for applied linguistics. In fact, archivists in the field, like Tony Howard, give Michigan credit for coining the term applied linguistics. It appeared as a subtitle to the journal Language Learning, a journal of applied linguistics. I think that may have been the Ian Catford connection, because he had come from Edinburgh to Michigan, and in Edinburgh they in fact had a graduate program in applied linguistics, or a school maybe even. But anyway, applied linguistics in the US context, Tony Howard gives us credit for having coined. So, and because it was my field, I was passionate about it, and I wanted to see a program in applied linguistics started here at Michigan, or maybe restarted is a better way to say it. But it became clear after I came that that was not going to happen. So I had to reorient my goals for the directorship. Of course, I was following in the able footsteps of John Swales, and he had started materials work with the EAP, and a lot of the lecturers, Chris Feek, of course. We had a summer program that was going very well. And of course, we had the work that Sarah and John and Rita Simpson worked on, my case, the corpus, Michigan corpus of academic spoken English. And then later, my CUSP, the Michigan Corpus Undergraduate Student Papers, both of which were made freely available to the academic community. The latter, in particular, was a collection of student papers that could be used by lecturers preparing materials. These were papers written by native speakers of English in various disciplines, undergraduate students, who had received a good grade. And, excuse me, and so that was a great trove of data that people could analyze for the features of the written word, term papers and that sort of thing. And so I wanted to continue those. I wanted to support the lecturers in doing their great work. They were great teachers in EAP and with the international graduate students, preparing them for classroom readiness. Of course, I didn't do all this myself. They did it, but I tried to support them. I had an able assistant in Carolyn Madden. Joan Morley told me when I came that, don't worry about anything, Carolyn runs the place. And I didn't quite find that to be true, but certainly Carolyn was a great leader of the teaching division. The corpus work and other activity was basically supported by the testing division. And so one of my goals was to support it. They were then in charge was still Mary Spahn, of course Bob Dobson also, and Sarah Briggs. And they were doing great work. But frankly, the work, their product was so successful, they couldn't really keep up with all the demand. So one of the things I did was to get new people in place and to promote some of the ones that had been there for a long time. I did the same thing with attempts at that with the instructors, and to try to provide the suitable support for the testing division that had been so important and been so much part of the ELI for a long time. We had a small research division, mainly for the development of the corpora, and to it I brought Nick Ellis, a professor of psychology from Bangor, Wales, whose specialty was second language, one of his specialties is second language acquisition. He's a psycholinguist. And I felt, of course, my own interest is in that area, and I felt that perhaps the acquisition of language, the development of language, in addition to the teaching and testing and language analysis that we were doing, that was a natural complement. And Nick and I worked together, and there was a postdoc, several postdocs actually, who worked with us. We even had a chance to go, thanks to John Holland, a professor at the University of Michigan, well-renowned for his work with complex systems. We got a chance to go to the Institute for Complex Systems in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is world famous. So that was a very exciting, academically exciting time for me. In addition, it became really clear to me when I returned to Michigan that there was a social need, and that was there were increasing numbers of English language learners in public schools in Michigan who had teachers who were compassionate but not prepared to deal with their language needs. In the meantime, I had lecturers at the ELI who were very good teachers, and one of the ways a good teacher continues to develop is to become a teacher educator. And so with a colleague, Kathy Reichel from the School of Ed, we collaborated on the development of something called the ESL endorsement program, basically a credential in the state of Michigan. And we developed a series of courses that graduate students at the School of Education could take to become endorsed, which would be an endorsement on their license to teach. And a number of the lecturers then taught in that program. And I felt that was a good opportunity for them and to make a commitment to our contribution anyway to what was going on outside us, outside the world. I tried to get the divisions working more across divisions and not as silos. I created, I think it was an unpopular move, but I insisted that everybody come to the all-staff meetings, everybody at the Institute, because I thought it was important that everybody know what was going on. And pretty much every meeting we had a report from the different divisions so that we could be mutually informed. And I know that it wasn't so popular because not everybody had all of the various divisions, interest in all of the various divisions' activities. But again, I thought it was important to try to forge a more unified understanding and appreciation of what the ELI stood for. In addition to all that academic activity, there were a lot of other things going on at the ELI. We had an open house when we moved. Oh, I didn't tell you that. Right after I came, 3 months after I came as director of the ELI, we moved from the North University building that had housed us for 40 years to the TCF Bank building on Division and Liberty. And it was a temporary headquarters for the ELI while they demolished the North University building to make way for the new life sciences complex. And I must say that well, at least my office was very nice on the corner, lots of windows, and with appointments from, furniture and furnishings, I should say, maybe from the bank. It was quite lovely. Most everybody, I think, was happy. But I spent a lot of time poring over the blueprints before we moved in with an architect, talking about weight-bearing walls, what could come down, what had to remain. I tried to get some inner light into the whole floor by putting a glass block window around the new library. And nothing in my academic career had prepared me for that. And we've moved since then several times as well, so that was sort of a major undertaking. We also restarted the ELI newsletter to let everybody on campus and alumni know what was going on. The SPON working papers, so that we commissioned or rewarded people who were doing work with our tests, if they were excellent, to write working papers that were published. As I said, we continue with the U of M Press to produce various materials and a guide to working with the My Case Michigan Corpus of Academic Spoken English, which at the time was, I think, the first, certainly one of the few corpora that had transcribed speech. It's much more difficult to do that, of course, than to have corpora of written data. So there were a lot of other sort of, I won't call them ancillary, but other activities that kept us hopping, but hopefully made a contribution. And about that time, I had finished up my term. I stayed an additional year at the invitation of the dean while we searched for my successor. And I took the position of research scientist at the ELI and continued my own work with complex systems and second language acquisition. And actually there was just a book published this week from John Benjamin's press that was kind of a festschrift for me because of that work. Others, of course, have contributed to it vastly. It's not all about me. I continued teaching at the School of Ed and in linguistics as well. I taught a course there and eventually retired from the University of Michigan. So as I started this, I'm now a professor emerita, I'm a director emerita, a research scientist emerita, and still very, very proud and very gratified for the experience I had at the University of Michigan and at the ELI.